Hi, I am David Spitz, a retired rabbi living here in Wynmoor, and I've been asked today to speak about spirituality. Spirituality is a very deeply intimate topic, different for every human being. And for me, from a Jewish tradition, I think of it in terms of Jewish experience. But you can think of it in the ways that mean sense to you. The Hebrew word for spirituality is ruchani. At its root is the word ruach, which means breath. Scripture tells us that God created human beings in his image and likeness, and then breathed into him this ruach chayim, this breath of life. And only then did man become a living soul. All human beings that descended from primordial man, from Adam, have within them that living soul, that ruach chayim. It is our task to discover that soul that is in each of us. The whole of creation is imbued with the divine. It is found in animals, in birds, in fish, in trees, in flowers. But it is only the human being that has that image of God, that spark that is of the divine. Human life is especially precious. It is wrong to waste it. Time is the most precious gift that God has given us. We need to use it wisely. We need not to take away the feelings of life by abuse of alcohol or opiates. In our journey through life, we find that probably the most important mark of a spiritual person is that respect that they have for other beings. It feels that in our society, that is very needed. There is an epidemic today of disrespect. We see it in the way people act with each other on TV and in TV games. We see it in schools as children bully other children. And in some cases, the bullying becomes so intense that the victim seeks suicide rather than to continue life. And often authorities don't discover what is going on until it is too late. Even in the political arena, there is disrespect for people. I was appalled during the last presidential election when I considered how candidates were talking to one another. Rather than advance their own programs, they put down their opponent. And yet, at the very end, one of the members of the audience asked the two major candidates, what is it that they see in the other person that they admire? And it was at that time that candidate Trump, who had put down Hillary, calling her Crooked Hillary, said, I admire her perseverance, her grit. And candidate Hillary said about candidate Trump, I admire his attachment to family. Would that they had discovered these things that they like earlier in the discourse. Scripture reports that man does not live by bread alone. Human beings need to have a sense of meaning, of purpose. This has been borne out very strongly that during the darkest hours of human existence, in a Nazi death camp, Viktor Frankl, a prisoner from Austria and a psychotherapist, whose only crime was that he was born a Jew, noted, as the scientist he is, that there were those who lived longer than others, and that this could not be attributed to physical health, that there was something else, and he was determined to discover what that something else was. So he, on his own time, interviewed other prisoners, other inmates. And what he found is that those who lasted the longest were those who had that sense of meaning, that sense of purpose that they felt would transcend these walls of horror. It could be being reunited with family and with friends. It could be returning to a job. It could be watching their children grow. But it was something that they could focus on that was above and beyond. As human beings, we need to have purpose. And Frankl's whole career changed as a result. He developed an approach to understanding human nature that he called logotherapy. And he delineated it in a book, Man's Search for Meaning. The book became so important that it became required reading at colleges and universities. After his work, therapists looked at what a person's goals were, what they hope to achieve, what motivates them, and gives them a sense of meaning. Hope for the future. That is what he talked about. But there is an overarching principle that is found in Viktor Frankl's work and indeed in all of life, and that is that of love. We never outgrow that need for love. Human babies are born out of it, and they thrive as a result of it. In a monumental study done by Renée Spitz in France, she found that babies within a foundling home were dying in greater numbers than those who were with their families at home. And she couldn't explain it, because France was the place that gave birth to the ideas of Louis Pasteur. They knew about sterilization. They knew about aseptic conditions in hospitals. And these babies were treated with tremendous concern to be germ-free. What she found is that the babies needed that sense of caring, of cuddling, of being shown affection, of being talked to. And it was that more than any other factor that led to their premature death. As human beings, we have a tremendous need to be cared for love. And sometimes we find it even in abusive relationships. One of the worst punishments a prisoner can be given is to be placed in solitary confinement, away from other people. And yet, being away from other people gives birth to a spirituality for those who are so inclined. Scripture tells stories of how people found their spirituality. Moses ascended a mountain and communicated with God and brought to the people a sense of law by being alone 40 days and 40 nights. Elijah, who fled from political intrigue, found God inside in a still small voice. There are moments in my own life that were moments of solitude. There was a period in which I felt friendless, and I walked for hours thinking about life. And it was there that I realized that no matter what else happens, I'm never alone, that there's a presence of God that is within me. And there was the time when my mom died, an unforgettable time, when the funeral directors that I had worked with for so many years came to my own home and carried her remains off and to the funeral home. Probably one of the most moving stories to me is one that we read every year on the Jewish New Year on Rosh Hashanah. It's the story of Hannah. Our rabbis of the past also felt it important, so important, that they said that we can learn all the principles of prayer just by studying the narrative of Hannah. Hannah is a woman that is despondent with grief. She wishes she had a child of her own. She is being tormented by the sister wife of her husband Elkanah. She has come to Elkanah with the problem, but he had assured her that the love that he has for her is greater than the love that he could possibly have for dozens of sons. And yet she is not convinced. She goes to the shrine in Shiloh and there prays. And Scripture describes her lips as moving, but words not coming out. And Eli, the high priest, discovers her and thinks that she's drunk. But Hannah is not drunk. Hannah is in communication with God. The Hebrew word for to pray is the word lehitpaleo. It is a reflexive. It is an interaction in which the person in prayer makes requests of God, and God in turn makes requests of that person. So Hannah vows that if she is given a son, that son would be devoted to divine service. And when that son is born, she fulfills that vow, and she names him Shmuel, which means God has heard. Well, today I have spoken to you about spirituality from my perspective as a Jew. But each of you has spirituality within you, and you have your own perspectives that you might be able to draw upon. It is part of the DNA that is part of each of us. I hope that you find this spirituality in your own lives.